Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. My name is Carrie. I am City Market's Assistant Outreach and Education Manager. I'm the one who's been sending you all of the emails, so now you can put a face to a name. I'm really excited to have you all tuning in tonight for our live stream on South Indian Pongal. I'm probably saying it wrong. I'm sure our lovely instructor will correct my pronunciation. This is probably the only time that you'll see me on camera. I'll be behind the scenes for the rest of this. You'll see that there's a Q&A box where you can submit questions and comments during tonight's class. I'll go behind the screen and I will put an announcement into that. You'll see a little red dot pop up so you can see where that is and how to access that. And if it's a question that I can answer on my end, I can type you an answer, or I'll ask it out loud to our instructor if it's something that you want the instructor's opinion on. If you're joining us a little bit late, you can always hit live. It's down near the play pause button, and that catches you up to where we are live rather than making you start from the very beginning of the program. I will also say that you all are watching this on about a 30-second delay from what we are streaming out. So in terms of like, if there's a sound glitch, feel free to send me a message being like, the sound's glitchy, but just know that you're hearing it 30 seconds later. And then if I fix something, the fix isn't coming for another 30 seconds. So I promise I see it, I'll try to get to it, or your question or whatever. If you're like, they haven't gotten to it yet, it's about a minute between receiving, sending, and receiving again. I think without further ado, that's all you need to hear about from me. You're much more interested in hearing about the Rice Festival, so I'll turn things over to our lovely instructor, Anna. Take it away.
Oh, thank you, Carrie. Welcome. Good evening, everyone. My name is Anna Mays, and I'm one of the instructors here at the wonderful community kitchen at City Market, Teaching Kitchen. I'm also a cultural anthropologist. I work in international development when I'm not here in Burlington cooking. And this class has very much come out of some of my field work. I always like to, when I teach a recipe in a class, I always like to try to look at where these dishes have emerged from, sort of what is the geography, the history, the culture that has sort of made the conditions just so that these dishes have sort of emerged and become traditional and popular. And so for this class, I thought that it would be a good opportunity to take this one dish that we'll be learning about, sort of one plus a couple of other little ones, and use that as sort of a window into looking at this, the history and the culture around this harvest festival in the south of India. So just a little bit of background about sort of why I got interested in Pongal cooking and in Pongal as the festival. Shortly after university, I was actually working in Tamil Nadu, just outside of Chennai in the Villapuram district in some rural areas where I was working on a women's microcredit project. And I happened to just be there for Pongal. I had no idea really what the festival was about, but I remember waking up one day and just walking down the street and seeing all of these women with their beautiful ceramic and copper pots out on the streets making these amazing smelling sort of rice dishes. And the rice was sort of overflowing from the pots, and they were decorated with beautiful flower garlands and turmeric leaves. And it was just made such a sort of visual impression on me that I spent a lot of time sort of learning about the Pongal festival. This was sort of probably the second day of the festival there. And I then just sort of fell in love with the savory version of this dish, Ven Pongal. And I ate it a lot over there for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. It's sort of a multi-purpose dish. And then sort of fast forward, just this past fall, I was working in Malaysia, where actually about almost 7% of the population is of Indian descent, mainly Tamils from the south of India. And one of my colleagues, whose grandparents were from Tamil Nadu, we were chatting one day about how much, how great South Indian food is. And she brought up the topic of Pongal and had I ever tried it. And it sort of brought it back to my mind as this dish that I used to just love so much. And I thought, why not use this as a chance to kind of teach a class on Pongal. We waited to schedule it till the week before the actual festival. And so that's sort of the background about the class.
Yeah.
So
interrupt you really quick. I realize that we should probably turn this around so you can see your own slides when you're talking about this. So
that would be great.
The camera's going to shake for just a minute.
So technical pause here.
Yeah. If it's not one thing, it's another.
Yeah. Oh.
Is that better? Can you see them?
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's great.
So you can let me know when you want me to advance slides when we're ready to talk about them and when you
Okay,
want
so
them.
they're not seeing
They're not seeing them quite yet. They're
Yeah,
seeing
okay.
you. You let me
That's
know
great.
when you want them
Okay,
to see slides.
perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers for that, folks.
Carrie's always so on top of it.
Oh,
Thank
Carrie should
you.
have been on top of it before we started class, but it's fine.
So the word Pongal, that refers to both this annual harvest festival as well as the 2 rice dishes that are made for the festival. It's a Tamil word that means to boil to the point of overflowing, sort of to overflow. And you'll see in some of the slides the pictures of these pots that are overflowing with rice. Rice has a very important role to play both in Indian diets as well as kind of history and tradition. Rice, I think in this country, we generally go to the grocery store and we find like 1 or 2 varieties of rice. We've got white rice and brown rice. Maybe we'll find like a couple types of basmati or other rices. But in general, I feel like in this country, at least, I didn't have an awareness of just how much diversity there is in terms of rice cropping around the world until I spent time in places like India and East Africa and most recently in Malaysia. So rice is just so important in so many diets. It's actually really one of the most important staple grains around the world. And I think it's particularly special in places in India where it's really relied on, and it's both kind of a daily staple, but then you have higher qualities of rice that are much more expensive and much more sort of aromatic and flavorful. And those are the rices that are used for some of these more sort of festive occasions. When I was in Malaysia, part of what we were doing was looking at food security and studying what households consume on a daily basis. It was really interesting to see just how many types of rice. We had at least 10 to 12 different types of rice that people were purchasing. And I think we've lost some of that, I think, diversity with all the export coming to the US. But so I thought this would be great.
Ruby actually asked, does overflowing have a significance like abundance, et cetera? Do you think it has to do with
Ruby's on this call.
Yeah, Ruby's here.
That's a great question, Ruby. Ruby's my neighbor. And yes, absolutely. And we're going to look at that in some of the slides that one of the sort of key aspects of this festival is to just celebrate abundance. And it's sort of like we think of Thanksgiving, sort of give gratitude for the harvest and all of the sort of overflowing food that we've been gifted. So yeah, that's a great question. I wanted to just mention that just a little bit about rice production. It's not an easy crop to grow. Rice is extremely labor intensive as a staple grain, and it requires a lot of water. 1 kilo of rice, to produce 1 kilo of rice, which is about 2.2 pounds. Let me see if I can show you. So this is about 2 kilos of rice here. So to produce half of that, it takes 1,500 liters. That's about 400 gallons of water to grow that much rice. So rice production in India has really centered in the areas where there's both a cheap labor force as well as a very high rainfall and a lot of water and water retention in the fields. And I have some images that I'd love to show you just sort of how rice is grown. I think we're sort of here in the dead of winter in Vermont. It was snowing this morning, and I thought it might be fun to just have some visual images. I think, South India is just so colorful, and there's so much verdant sort of green growing everywhere with the rice paddies that it might be fun to just show you a little bit of what this festival is like before we dive into the cooking. So if you don't mind bearing with us for just a couple slides. Yeah. I hope you haven't been on conference calls all day with slides, but
so they are seeing the slides.
Okay, great. So we'll just start off with a very quick geography lesson here. And this is also on the back of your handout. So Tamil Nadu, where the Pongal festival is celebrated, is down at the tippy south end of India. It borders Kerala and Andhra Pradesh to the north, with Karnataka in sort of the northwest of Tamil Nadu. And I would say it's one of the sort of less industrialized parts of the country. It also is one of the main rice growing states in India. The other main rice growing states are, if you go up north, there's Uttar Pradesh, and actually east of that, West Bengal is probably the #1 rice producing state, followed by Uttar Pradesh, and then Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu are both very high up there in terms of rice production. So that's just to give you a bit of a sense of where we're going to be sort of focusing today. Tamil Nadu, I should mention, this is a festival that's absolutely sort of this Hindu Tamil festival in the south of India, but there are similar rice harvest festivals in other states. All have their own name, and most of them do occur around the harvest season, which is in January. So for the main rice harvest, there are actually 3 different cropping seasons for rice in India. The main one is the winter season, which is planted in June and July and harvested then in December. So it's ready then to be consumed in January. And that produces about 85% of the country's rice. So I think we can move on to the next one. This is kind of what you see just driving around in Tamil Nadu. You just see at this time of year, or sort of probably a month earlier from where we are now, you would just see all these fields of paddy. So before the rice grains are dehusked, when it's still on the plant, it's known as paddy. So this is paddy cropping, paddy farms. You can see this here is a farmer plowing the paddy field with cows, oxen, right before planting. This is the amount of water that is necessary at ground level to really grow rice. If you look in the background of this picture, you'll see a little nursery. There are 2 rows here at the way back where you can see the farmer is growing the rice in these sort of clumps, which will then be very carefully torn apart and planted throughout the field. So that's the little field nursery there.
Ruby says, San Francisco has a lot of rain right now. Maybe we should start growing rice, LOL. And we have somebody asking if the class is being recorded. Yes, we are recording this. It'll be posted on our website at a later date. And I'll send an email out to everybody when that goes up.
And I do believe there are some farms in northern Vermont that have tried growing rice.
Trying to be Vermont rice, but it's very cost intensive.
Yeah, it's as you heard, it's not the most easy crop to grow in a northern climate. But here you can see it's often the women's job to plant out the rice. So you can see these are this whole field was each individual plant was put there by hand. It's an extremely labor intensive process. You can see here there's
sorry, should I go back?
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, these little tassels, you can see that's where the grain is going to be growing. Okay. All right, so here I'm going to bring us to a little more detail about the festival of Pongal. So the Pongal festival is about 4 days. In some regions, they only celebrate the first 3 days, but the full festival is 4 days. And the first day, each day has a name. The first day is Bogi Pongal, and it's a day for cleaning out your house. I think we can all relate to this at the beginning of January. Cleaning your home, getting rid of anything you don't use anymore that's unnecessary. And those items are actually thrown on a bonfire outside the home. Traditionally, it was a bonfire made burning cow dung, because that's a very good fodder. And then you kind of rid yourself of all the old things. You go and you buy new clothes, new things for your home, and you sort of start the new year or start a new chapter. So it's sort of a time of renewal. So that's the first day. And this picture is women sort of with their bonfire, getting rid of the old unnecessary things in their homes. So the second day is Surya Pongal. And this is actually the main day of the Pongal festival, and it's a day in honor of the sun and the sun deity. Surya is the sun. And when you wake up, basically as soon as the earliest rays of the sun come up, women will go out and they will start decorating outside of their front door, sort of in their porch area, with these beautiful kolam. This is an ancient Tamil practice of making decorative art. It's a traditional art that was done with like a rice powder combined with the red clay soil, powdered, of the region. Nowadays, it's done with chalk and everything, lots of different dyes to make these vibrant colors. But there are just beautiful patterns that are made, and that they're sort of considered auspicious. And women are the ones who do the artwork for those. Those are the kolam. And then as the sun rises, that's when everyone goes out in front of their house and makes a big pot of pongal. And the pongal that is made sort of as part of the ceremony is actually the sweet pongal. And you start with milk. Well, actually, I should mention the pot is adorned, usually with turmeric leaves. This is also the season for turmeric and sugarcane harvesting. So those two items sort of feature very much in the foods eaten for pongal. And so you basically overflow your pot with milk. And there's a tradition where people say, has milk boiled? And everyone responds, the milk has overflowed. And that does symbolize sort of the abundance of the harvest that people are appreciating. And then you put into the pot the rice and jaggery, which is a raw sugar from the sugarcane. And that's made into this delicious sweet pongal, which is first offered to the gods and then to the animals. The cows are very important in the rice growing regions, and then it's consumed by the family. And then in the rest of the day is when everyone makes the savory pongal that is then shared with everyone, which is the one we're going to make tonight. So here's just another photo where you can see an example of the kolam, and you can see they're just beautiful. Yeah. And then the third day of Pongal is the day for the cows.
Yay.
So, yay. Cattle do very, very hard work along with the humans who are laboring to grow rice in India. And there are some beautiful stories and sort of, in the Hindu tradition, there's some beautiful stories about sort of how the cow came to do what the cow does. But this is the day where cows are washed, bathed, and then their horns are adorned with colorful paint, and then they also have garlands and bells, and they're oftentimes just taken from village to village and then allowed to graze freely. So it's a lovely day for the cows. Pongal is also served to the cows, the sweet pongal. And then the last day is Kanum Pongal. And here's just, I wanted to include that, another example of the kolam. So this final day is a day for visiting friends and neighbors. And it's a time to just exchange gifts and share food. There's dancing, and women will often gather outside the home and give a prayer for the well-being of their brothers and their brothers' families. So that's a final day that isn't celebrated everywhere, but is part of the Pongal tradition. So it's very much a festival about being grateful to Mother Nature and the sun and the rain and the cows for all of the abundance of rice harvest, as well as the other things that are harvested at that time. So that's just a little bit about Pongal. I think I'll stop there and maybe just give a chance for any questions before we dive into the cooking demo.
We just have Ruby saying, where I come from, Bombay, they call it rangui, and day off for the cows, haha.
Oh, okay, neat. Oh, Ruby. So yeah, if you have other, I'd love to hear if you have other thoughts or traditions, definitely chime in. We can type those in. All right.
Back to you on the full screen, even though you still see the slides.
Okay.
Back to just them seeing you.
All right, great. So I thought that it would be most interesting, in fact, to do a demo for the savory version of Pongal, the Ven Pongal. That's the version I find that is actually the most maybe nutritious, the most nourishing. I think oftentimes in the US here, we eat a lot of like sweet foods for breakfast. And when I was in Tamil Nadu, it was actually really nice to have some savory items for breakfast. There's a lot of like uttapam and dosa and idli, and the things that are just more of kind of tangy and savory. And this Pongal, Ven Pongal, is one of those things. It's a combination of the legume, it's like a split yellow pea combined with rice. And those are just cooked together, which in fact make a really well-balanced kind of protein, because you have the starch and then the protein from the lentils. So by itself, that's like a really balanced meal. And then it's flavored with all of these spices and ginger that have been tempered in ghee, which give it just this amazing aroma. And then at the end, it's sprinkled with these sort of ghee fried cashews. So it's a very rich dish indeed, but it is also just really, I feel like it's sort of a perfect winter comfort food for here in the Northeast. So I was excited to teach it to you. It's one of my favorite things to have for breakfast throughout the winter. And I often will cycle through oatmeal and then pongal. So I thought I'd give you this recipe as something fun to try. In your recipe packet, you also have the sweet version on the second page. And this version is made with water, but if you do want to be kind of traditional and make it extra rich, you can make it with a sort of 4 cups of milk. You can sub just 1-to-1 water for milk or milk for water. So tonight I'm just going to demo the ven pongal, and if we have time, I'll show you how to kind of throw together a quick coconut chutney. And then if you'd like on your own, you can experiment. I've given you the recipe for the sweet pongal.
Do you have someone asking, the decorations look like Buddhist mandalas. Are they made with sand, chalk, or other? Do you want to mention what the materials are again?
Interesting. Yeah. So maybe there is some overlap in the design. The materials that are used, I think nowadays chalk is probably the most common. Traditionally, it's basically a sort of paste or like a dry mix was made with rice that had been ground and like powdered rice, along with then the clay soil from the region that's very sort of red, that was dried and ground together. So it was like traditionally sort of red, those maybe more red orange colors. But now I think it's chalk mainly. Yeah.
Ruby says, Medu Vada, wow, my mouth is watering. Someone's asking, isn't moong dal the same bean as mung beans, just split and with the hull removed?
That is a great question. Yes, thank you for asking that, because actually I had wanted to just say a little bit about the bean. So moong and moong, spelled M-O-O-N-G, they're really the same. There are many spellings for this legume. My understanding is that as soon as a legume has been split and hulled, it then gets referred to as a dal. We were discussing actually at my book club on over the weekends, we were doing an Indian cookbook. What's the difference between lentils and dal? And I looked it up, and I think
All right, we should hopefully be back. Sorry for the glitchy. Sometimes the software just decides it's tired and I have to restart it. Give me 30 seconds to hear the sound coming through, and then hopefully it should be all set. But thanks for whoever let me know in the comments. Give it 1 second and then we should be good. Yep. Awesome.
okay, great. Sorry
about that, folks.
We're back. So mung beans, you can see here, these are the yellow mung beans that have been dehulled. The hulls have been taken off and they've been split. And I think those are the same as the mung beans. And there are many different kinds. I was saying earlier that I think that in terms of what's the difference between a lentil and dal, and I think what people have said is that when you actually dehull and split the lentil and then use it in a dish, it becomes known as dal. So that's why I think we could call this sort of dal. It's really the same. Yeah, there are so many types of beans, and mung beans. I think there's yellow, there's maybe green. There are different ones. So you want to look for this dish. I mean, I should say to begin with, this is super flexible, and you can use whatever is most available to you. And that's what people do in India and elsewhere is really whatever the locally grown bean or rice is what you would be using. But what this recipe calls for is the yellow split mung beans. And we actually carry them downstairs at City Market. They're in the bulk section. kind of by the split peas is where you'd find them.
Do you want to talk about India Bazaar too for people who are local here?
Yes. Yeah. So for anyone who's local, we have a really great Indian supermarket in South Burlington on Williston Road, and it's called India Bazaar, and we'll type in the name and the address so you can find it. But it's a small shop, but they have so many different things, especially some of the harder to find things, and especially some of the spices from South India. I found Degli Mirch, which is this blend of chili peppers that I couldn't find anywhere else, and they had it there. The shop owner is very knowledgeable, so feel free to just chat with him if you have any questions. It's a great shop. So that's where these came from. And then in terms of the rice varieties, so as I was mentioning earlier, there are so many types of rice, and I was actually trying to find a variety of rice that's grown in Tamil Nadu that was recommended to me by a friend, but it's actually not exported, I've been told, so I couldn't find that. But what we have here are two different recommendations. So first of all, any short to medium grain rice should be fine. In this dish, we're not looking for like a fluffy, light rice that would be like you'd use for a biryani. It's sort of the opposite end of the spectrum. We're looking for a rice that will produce almost like a porridge, that will be sort of mushy. And a lot of cooks will actually mash up their rice at the end to make it even more mushy. It's going to be cooked a lot. So if you're one of those people like me that's a little nervous about trying rice dishes because they have to be like perfectly timed and done just the right way, this is a good dish to try because it's very forgiving, and the end result is just sort of this porridge consistency. So to achieve that, what I've used today, and what's a very nice rice is this for Pongal, is Sona Masuri. So this is a rice that is grown in Andhra Pradesh, just north of Tamil Nadu, and it's used in South Indian cuisine a lot. I've put some in a bowl here for you to see. I don't know if you can see on camera. It's a very small rice. It's sort of a light and airy, small grained rice that's pretty aromatic. Another option, more to the direction of sort of an arborio rice, like a more creamy rice, is this idli rice. And this is what's used to make the idli, to make dosa. It's kind of very starchy, and you can see here it's a more short grained rice that will get kind of a little bit gelatinous.
If asking, is jasmine rice okay, or is that sort of?
So jasmine rice is always good. It's a beautiful rice. It's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum of what you'd want for a dish like this. I'd say it would almost be like a waste of the good qualities of jasmine rice because you're going to cook it so much. But you absolutely could use it. I wouldn't, if you had a choice between these, I maybe wouldn't sort of buy it at a store for this, but it's totally fine. You could even use basmati. And traditionally, we would be using like a white rice, but you could also use a brown rice. That would be more, if you're interested in more of like the health qualities of the dish afterwards. Yeah. And I should mention all rice is brown rice originally. It's just that most of our rice then has the hull pulled off, more of the bran pulled off to become white rice. So we've got our dal, and also I should mention for dal, if you don't have access to these to the mung beans, you could also use like red lentils. They disintegrate nicely. You could use regular lentils. It's super flexible. I was reading a lot of cooks online were talking about how they like to substitute instead of rice. They might use things like quinoa or millet. So really any grain and any legume can work for this. So in the recipe packet, I just wanted to mention, any of you who've taken classes with me before, you know I generally use the metric system, and I prefer that because it's a little more precise. However, for this recipe, I have just used the imperial system by volume, and that is to emphasize that precision is not essential in this recipe. You can just really, these are just kind of a guide to the quantities, but you can really kind of make everything to taste, especially around the spices.
We have one more question on the rice. Alice is asking, to make sushi, use short grain rice. I'm assuming this could be used for Pongal.
Yes, you could use a sushi rice. That's going to be, I think, a little more sticky, but that's totally fine. That would be, that it may just stick together a little bit more, but it would be delicious. Yeah, I think a short grain sushi rice would work well. Yeah. So the first step is to prepare our lentils. Now, let me say this. I was thinking how to explain this. There are basically like two ways for me to explain this recipe. One would be just like the quick and dirty. You're basically taking lentils and rice, putting them into a pot, adding water, and cooking them. Now that's kind of the broad brushstrokes of what we're doing. I'm going to now talk through some very specific details for how to make this a little more traditional. But if it feels like it's complicated or overwhelming, just disregard that and you can just throw everything into a pot. Okay, so take whichever method you prefer.
Is it a Friday night thing or a Saturday morning?
Exactly. Do you feel like getting obsessed with all the details, or do you just want to make a quick pot of something healthy? So the first step is to prepare the split, the dal, the mung beans. There are two methods. The most traditional method is to roast the mung beans. So I've already done that here. You basically just take a thick bottomed pot, you don't want it to burn, and on low heat for about 5 minutes, just kind of toast them. You can see here, I don't know if I can hold this up to show you, they've browned a little bit. You want them to turn a little bit golden yellow, sort of even more golden yellow without burning. It's a fine line between when it's perfect and then when it starts to burn, but you'll smell it first. So I always like to say, you know, we're cooking just as much with our nose as we are with our eyes. Or the other way to prepare the mung is to soak it. And that's actually the method that I prefer if I'm trying to make a dish that's the most nourishing. I do a lot with legumes, and there's actually a lot of science that says the more you soak the beans first, the more easily digestible they are. So that's what I like to do, even if they've already been split. I was talking to a friend from Tamil Nadu, and she was saying that actually she soaks her beans for a different reason. There are a lot of pesticides and fungicides that are used in rice production in India to try to increase the yields and combat the sort of constant wetness of the environment. And they do have some residues. So she likes to soak her rice, her dal, to just let any residue from the pesticides sort of dissipate into the water. So I recommend at least a 4-hour soak if you're doing this method. I usually just put them in at night and let them soak overnight. And then you're going to just pour off the water. And
we have a quick question, two questions actually. Ruby asked, can yellow split peas be used instead of the mung beans? Sounds like yes.
Yes, that would be a great substitute. Yeah.
And then someone says, are you toasting the dal after you've overnight soaked it, or would you do one or the other but not both?
Okay, yes, thanks for clarifying that. So it's one or the other. These are two different methods. So either you're toasting it dry, doing a dry toast, or you're soaking it.
Yeah, and that's why both of those steps are in the recipe.
Yes, well, and actually the next step with the soaked bean is to do something similar to dry toasting, but since it's already wet, the way we will get around that fact is we're going to add some fat to the pan. And that's going to allow us to kind of get that same flavor, like to get the nuttiness to come out before we're actually cooking it in water by basically sort of sauteing it in ghee. So it's a workaround. I'd say that probably this isn't the traditional way that everybody does. I know a lot of women in Tamil Nadu who do it this way, kind of for the health benefits, but feel free to try whichever you'd like. It's a little bit more, I'd say, elegant to dry toast it first. It's just a little easier to work with. Here you are sort of dealing with fat and a wet product in there, but yeah, I think it tastes good. It also cuts down on the cooking time to have soaked the dal. Now, for anybody that has a pressure cooker at home, this is a perfect dish. And many people, in fact, most people in India would be using their pressure cooker to make this. But I don't mind, actually. I don't think it really takes that long. And it gives you time to then temper the spices. So I'm just melting my ghee here.
We also have someone asking, should you rinse the rice and or beans before cooking?
Okay, yes. So the beans that have been soaked have been rinsed. You're going to kind of rinse them a couple of times after they've been soaking. The dry beans, these absolutely will be rinsed after they've been toasted. Okay, so I'd say in both steps, we are both toasting and rinsing, just in different orders. So if I was going to be making the recipe with the dry beans, I would, at this stage, having toasted them, I would then rinse them in under cold water for like a minute or two, just to kind of, get them fully rinsed. The rice will be rinsed, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second once I get these on.
Yeah. And we have Joe asking, can you use olive oil or another neutral oil to fry for these? I'm vegan, so they don't want to use.
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so if you're trying to avoid dairy, you absolutely could use other fats. My go-to fat when I'm not cooking with dairy is actually coconut oil. And I think that would be delicious in this dish. It's got that same sort of richness as the ghee, especially if you're doing the sweet pongal. That would be really good. But certainly you could use olive oil. You could try maybe avocado oil, might have that same richness. Sunflower oil, really, any oil that is going to just have a nice flavor to it, because the oil is sort of, or the fat is sort of it plays an important role in this dish, I would say. But again, in India, I think oftentimes we're using ingredients that have come out of the natural environment that we're in, and because of the importance of cows, ghee is just, it features very widely in Indian cuisine and is a very special thing to be using. It sort of makes it, that's one of the things that makes it a special, like, festive dish. But yeah, I think any other oils would be good. All right, so I'm adding the soaked dal to the ghee. And I'm just going to let that kind of saute for, I think in the recipe I say 5 to 7 minutes, but really as long as it takes for it to start to get aromatic, flavorful, and a little bit browned. Don't be shy about adding the ghee. Feel free to put a good tablespoon in. You'll see later on, ghee is sort of, we're not skimping on the ghee in this recipe.
Could you, if you were trying to be
you absolutely could. Okay. Yes, you could totally cut down the ghee. If you're not making this for the Pongal festival where everything is sort of rich and overflowing, you could absolutely just make it with a little bit, just enough to kind of to coat the bottom of the pan. And when we fry you could even actually just like toast the cashews and not even worry about frying them. So you could dry temper the spices as well, just kind of toast them in a pan. So certainly feel free to cut down on the fat if that's best for your diet.
Ruby's asking, can this be made in an Instant Pot? And it sounds like
yes. So an Instant Pot would be great. That certainly speeds up the process. And you just throw it all in there and give it, maybe 6 to 7 whistles. That's how it's most commonly made, I would say. All right, so while this is browning just a little bit, I'm going to mention about the rice, how to prepare the rice. So rice has so many ways of being prepped for use in recipes. And this rice for this dish, it's very important to rinse your rice. I recently, in this Indian cookbook we were studying with my book club at the Fletcher Free Library here in Burlington, they had a really interesting method where they basically rinse it 3 times, but don't even like pour it into another vessel like a sieve. You can just kind of pour cold water on, rinse it around, let the rice settle, pour off the water, and do that 3 times. So you're not having to dirty this. And then they let it sit in water, or you actually let it sit in water for 45 minutes first. And you're just, by soaking it, it then will speed up the cooking time. And for a dish like this, I think that could be a good option if you're trying to kind of get things going quickly in the evening. You could leave both your dal and your rice to soak for a little bit in the afternoon.
I love that every step of this recipe basically has had if you want to, if not, it'll still be great.
Totally. This is very much a kind of people's dish. It's a rustic country dish that you can really do with as you please. Yeah, as fits your household's diet. So once the dal is toasted a little bit, we're now going to add the rinsed rice into the dal. And some people will actually flavor it already and throw in some cumin or some ginger and let it boil, let it sort of simmer with those spices in it. I think the most traditional way is to add the spices at the end as tempered spices. You can just throw in about a teaspoon of salt. I told Carrie to make sure I don't forget the salt, or it won't be nearly as good. And then we're going to finally add the water. So in the recipe, I think it calls for 7 cups of water. If you have already soaked your rice and your dal, you might not need quite that much. You might start with 6.5 cups. If you're using a brown rice, you'll definitely need 7 cups and maybe a little bit more. So I've already measured that out. And it looks like a lot of water compared to what's in the pot, but you'll see both the dal and the rice will really absorb that water. So I'm going to bring this up to a boil. And then as soon as it reaches a boil, we will cut the heat and let it simmer. And I didn't grab the lid, but we will pretend that this is the right lid.
It should be in the closet behind you if you want me to.
Oh, okay, that's right. I think this fits. Yay. So like I said, it's just, we're gonna just let it come to a boil, and then we'll turn it down to maybe medium low and then just let it simmer. I didn't put a number of minutes in the recipe because this is very much up to dependent on what kind of rice and how you've treated the dal ahead of time. Generally for me, when I've soaked the dal, it takes about 20 minutes. So if you want to write that down as just kind of a ballpark figure, but I like to just kind of keep an eye on it. As with rice in general, you don't need to stir it or disturb it, but you can just kind of peek and see how it's doing. If it's getting a little bit dry at the bottom, then you can add a little bit more water. Again, we're going for a consistency that is more like a porridge, not a pilaf or a biryani. So I'm going to just let that cook. And while it's cooking, we're going to work on the spices. So I'm going to actually take this over here and put it on the other stove, just so that we've got the burner. Okay. And so this next part is a really fun part. This is where we get to decide how we want the dish to really taste. What flavors besides the just sort of subtle flavor of the rice and the dal we want. And that first step will be the same whether you're making the sweet pongal or the savory then pongal.
I did have one more question that came in.
Yeah.
If you've soaked one, should you also soak the other so that they cook at the same? Like if you soak your lentils or your mung beans, if you then add unsoaked rice, are they going to cook differently, or should you?
That's a great question. That's a good question. And I think if the dish was more like precision oriented, that they both need to come out just the right texture, it would matter. But actually with this dish, you're basically cooking everything until it's mushy. So it doesn't really matter that much. But in general, I will often just leave the rice to sit for maybe half an hour or so, more just for practicality, because I want it to be ready sooner.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
So, but that's a good question. Yeah. So I'm going to heat the pan here. And the first step is just to add a lot of ghee. I think in the recipe I said like 6 to 8 tablespoons, but you're basically wanting enough to kind of deep fry the cashews.
Have we talked about what ghee is for people that maybe
that's that's a great question. So ghee, Ghee, is the Indian form of clarified butter. So if you're familiar with French cuisine, a lot of the French like to use clarified butter. And in India, it's really the same thing, just goes by the name of ghee. And it's made by basically heating up butter to the point where the milk fats sort of separate from the rest of the fats. And you have these sort of like white specks that come to the top. You then like take those off sort of with a sieve or a like a broth spoon, and then you pour off the ghee, and then there are some milk solids at the bottom that you sort of discard, or you can use those in sourdough. That's a great thing for them. But what that does is it's basically separating off the part of the butter that will burn and that will caramelize and turn dark. And so by doing that, you're taking away anything that might burn, and you're basically increasing the sort of boil, or what would you call it? Like the heat point, the smoke point of the ghee. So you could actually use this for really high heat cooking, and it's never going to burn. It's a wonderful invention. Whoever realized you could do that with butter. It's wonderful because it has that high smoke point, but also has this amazing rich kind of dairy flavor to it. And
it lasts forever.
And it's really, it's actually shelf stable.
Because it's the milk solids that's going bad in butter, right?
Exactly. So, yeah. I mean, I like to keep it in the fridge if I'm not using it, just because it will like keep it a little more nutrient dense. But it's totally fine out on the countertop for like a week or I've actually gone to making all of my pancakes in ghee because it's just delicious.
Yeah.
So, and it's also, I would say, important in Ayurvedic traditions. Ghee is actually considered really helpful for certain types. So I think I've got almost enough ghee here. Let's add a little more.
Again, might as well just finish the jar.
Right.
Unless you need it for anything else with the rest of the recipe.
I might add a little at the end, so I'm just gonna, I'll hold back, but you're right. I should just finish it up.
I think you're really the only one that
uses ghee.
Use it for your crate classes and use it for this.
I'm a big fan of ghee. Yes. So one thing that makes this dish like really special is the use of cashews. I'm not sure if cashews grow in Tamil Nadu, but they probably do, given how affordable they are. I wanted to just show you, when you purchase raw cashews, and you definitely want to look for the raw ones that are not salted or roasted, it's usually pretty easy to just pull the nut apart to separate it out. And if you have the time, it's nice in this dish to kind of separate out the seeds, the sort of the two sides of the nut. And it just one sort of a full one is a lot, and it's nice to sort of maintain the shape. So that's how it's usually done. And I did that for about 20 to 30 cashews. If you're here in Burlington, City Market does have like this reduced price raw cashew bin in the bulk department, where it's like the pieces of halves and pieces. They're not quite as picture perfect as these, but they're cheaper and they're already halved. So you could go for those. So I'm gonna saute these. I'm just gonna add these, and it should be at I'd say medium high temperature. So they should like sizzle a little bit when you add them.
Have someone asking if you'll teach people how to make ghee and idli sambar in another class. So maybe for a future.
That would be a great class. I love South Indian food. I would be happy to do more classes. Yeah. Idli would be great. No, and ghee is super easy to make. It's absolutely something I can show folks how to do.
But we also do sell it, not to shill products, but like if you don't have the time to make it.
Yeah, you don't have to make it. You can buy it. You can see there's Organic Valley has one. It's becoming, I feel, a lot more popular and accessible in local grocery stores.
I can go get another jar if you need one.
I think we'll be okay. We'll see. Yeah.
It's helpful to be doing these classes right above a grocery store.
It is. Yeah. Oh, now I'm thinking about idli. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So good. All right. So I'm just going to let that go probably for 3 to 4 minutes. What we're looking for is like a golden brown color. Kind of we're really toasting them until they turn slightly brown. The other ingredients we're going to be using, I should mention I'm curious how many folks have done tempering of spices in this kind of Indian method before. Feel free to just type me or yes, or because it's really, I'd say it's sort of changed my cooking a lot. It's a wonderful way to kind of maximize the flavor of spices that I might be using in other dishes, but don't quite have that same sort of burst of flavor as when they've been heated and sauteed in ghee. You can also dry temper spices and just kind of toast them in a pan. That's how you'd make your, masala blends and then kind of grind all the spices together. But it's a wonderful way to add flavor to any dish. And I'd say if you decide not to make this dish in the future, one thing to take away from this class is just this method of tempering spices in ghee or in olive oil or in, coconut oil. It's a great kind of cooking technique. All right, so this is starting to brown a little bit. I feel like if I start talking about the other spices, I'm definitely going to burn these. So, and there's just something about the flavor of ghee and cashew. The smell is just so good.
We have a couple no's, a couple yeses. Joe asking, is there general guidance for which spices or herbs need tempering and which are better added without?
Yes, yeah. So that's a good question. It's great to hear folks have done tempering before. Yeah, that's great. And if you haven't, yeah, hopefully this can show you kind of some basics. So there are some spices like hinge, also known as asafoetida, that we'll be using tonight, which is it's the resin of this perennial plant that's native to North Africa and used in Afghanistan. And also, yeah, it's used in a lot of different regions, and it's sort of this resin ground into a powder. And that is a very kind of already has a very strong smell. Let me show it to you here. It's powdered, and I wish I could like transmit the smell to you guys because it's very specific. As soon as I went to the India market and got this, my whole car smelled of hinge.
We did have someone asking what you can substitute for it if you can't find that specific.
Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely. So you can so that's a spice that doesn't get tempered very long at all. I only add it kind of at the very end. You wouldn't want to leave that on high heat for too long. To answer that question. So let me just show you. These have gotten brown quickly. You can see. It
smells amazing in here.
I'm just going to quickly put them into a bowl out of the hot ghee.
It smells like you've made cookies. I don't know if it's like the butter or the cashews themselves, but it smells like chocolate chip cookies or something in here.
Interesting.
Very baked good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably the
someone here uses tempering for dal all the time. Great. So it sounds like it's kind of mixed between yeses and nos.
Yeah. Okay. So someone uses it all the time. That's great. Yeah. Great. Okay. So I'm just gonna, at home, I have a slatted spoon that I use for this that I'd recommend. That's an easier way. All right. So you can see this is what we're aiming for. Just nice and toasty. All right. So our next, I'm just gonna make sure I follow the order I recommended. The order isn't super important. Just gonna take this off. So if your cashews like these had a lot of pieces in them, that's going to be a bit harder to get out. So I'm just going to take this off while I'm talking. All right. So the next thing to do is to prepare our peppercorns. So this is a dish that you sort of have to like pepper or kind of embrace pepper in a different light, I would say. When I first had it, I crunched down on a whole peppercorn. I was like, wow, is that a mistake? Should that have been taken out of the dish? But no, actually, pepper is used very liberally in this dish, and it's actually delicious. And I've come to really like the flavor of sort of these whole peppercorns. I like to use the Tellicherry peppercorns, which are actually they're sort of the finest grade peppercorn out of a pepper crop. They're larger and they just have like a really good flavor because of that sort of larger size. We do carry them down in the bulk section here. So I'm just going to give these a quick pound with a mortar and pestle. You want to kind of break some of them up, but leave some that are whole.
To the bottom of your cast iron.
Oh,
take some
thank
on the
you.
bottom.
Yeah. So, and this is up to you. If you don't want the whole peppercorns, feel free to go a little farther with the grinding, the crushing here. But I kind of like it. Carrie's going to be eating this too. Carrie, do you mind whole peppercorns?
I don't mind.
Yeah, are you all right? All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, great. All right. So you can see I've ground some, but I've kept some whole, and I love also the look. It's really nice. But to bite down on
I figured too, if I don't like them, they're easy enough to pick around. You okay?
Yeah. No, to take out. Yeah,
take
totally.
them out, yeah.
Well, that's one of the better things with keeping them whole. You're making it easier to take out. Yes, true. Okay. So we've prepped that and it's ready. And so our next step, usually if you add cumin to a recipe, it should be toasted ahead of time. This is the cumin seed. For this, I haven't toasted the cumin because we're essentially doing that while we're putting it into the ghee. So it's sizzling a little bit. I'm putting in the cumin. I want to make sure I give you the right order. And the peppercorns first. You can kind of think of it as the most like hard seeds or grains of the peppercorn. They're going to be toasted first.
Ruby says, love the mortar and pestle. Yeah, it's great. It's made out of Himalayan pink sea salt, so it looks great. I'm not sure it's the most, not user-friendly, but like, it probably should be more of a decorative item. But
it's beautiful,
it's
yeah.
beautiful.
At home, I have a really big mortar and pestle from Thailand, and it's like just the weight of the pestle itself will crush the.
That's a little
grains.
hard to bring in.
It's hard to carry. Like yeah. All right, so these are sizzling. I'm starting to smell the cumin and the black pepper. And now I'm going to turn it down slightly and add the ginger root. So this was about, I think, 2 to 3 inches of ginger root that I took the skin off and then minced. Feel free to adjust the quantity of ginger to your liking. I really like ginger, so this is a good amount of ginger. Carrie does too. Yeah. Great. Great.
This is when I wish we had smell-o-vision technology, because
I know
smells really good in here and no one else
seriously
are able to experience that.
We're sending you the smells here. I'm also then going to add some green chili. Now, if you're using this dish as an offering, you would not include the chili, but for home use, if you're just going to be eating it and like something a little bit more sort of hot and spicy, let me just show you. Where did I put the chilies? There they are. So these are available. Unfortunately, we don't carry them here at the store in Burlington, but you can find them at the Indian market. You can see these are sort of the Thai green chilies, and they're very hot. And I usually will put on gloves when I'm cutting them at home. Otherwise, I'll like rub my eye, and they definitely burn. But in a dish like this, a little goes a long way, and they're really great. So I'm adding some slit de-seeded green peppers here. I did actually bring you a jalapeno to show if you like something not quite so spicy, you could try jalapenos, which we have downstairs.
Ruby's also asking, what about chili flake instead of the peppercorn?
Ooh. Oh, instead of the peppercorn?
Or maybe instead of either the peppercorn or the
pepper. You could try that, like a red chili that's been dried. You could try that. It will give a different result, but certainly you could experiment with that. I would say maybe try it first so you taste it this way, and then try with that and see which you like better. But you absolutely could substitute. You could use like a red fresh chili as well if you prefer the red, or if that's what you have on hand. And then the last thing I'm going to put in on this round of additions is turmeric. So this is the dried turmeric root. If you have fresh turmeric, you could also add that. It's not as readily available. So dried is okay. I think someone was asking about the tempering of spices and which ones not to do. So turmeric doesn't usually have a very long tempering. You wouldn't put it in at the beginning. It might turn a little bit bitter, but towards the end is good. And then the final thing we're going to add while it's on the heat is curry leaves. So these, I was going to show you my packet of curry leaves. These are available downstairs at City Market. There's an organic farm in, I think these are from Florida. Also at the Indian Market, they have curry leaves, and they're this like really nice aromatic leaf that comes in these sort of strands or branches. And the recipe calls for sort of 2 branches that you've taken the leaves off. Really easy to take the leaves off. And then we're going to throw them into the ghee as well. I like having them whole in the final dish at the end. I've had guests who come over and I feed this to, and I'll like wash the dishes afterwards and see like 3 or 4 leaves placed on the plate that they didn't want to eat it. They sort of picked it out, and that's totally fine too. You don't have to eat them, but they are edible and fine.
What's the difference between curry leaves and lime leaves? Usually mac fruit lime leaves. Are dried leaves okay to use if you can't find fresh?
Oh, yes. So you could use dry curry leaves. Yeah. One trick I should mention, when I was living in London, one of my classmates, who is Indian, she was explaining to me what she and her mom do. They buy the curry leaves fresh and then just throw them in the freezer because they're not always accessible or available in stores. And so they freeze really well, and you won't be able to tell in a dish if they've been frozen or not. So that's one way around not having to use the dried. But the dried is okay. Yeah, it's not quite the same, but that's totally fine. Lime leaves, feel like that might add a slight different flavor. They sort of look alike, but I think the final flavor would be really different. I think it's the curry leaf along with all the spices, but especially things like the hinge and the cumin and the curry leaf that really make the flavor of Pongal what it is. So I'd say if you're going to look hard, go scouting around for some of these ingredients, definitely the curry leaves would be a good one.
Alice is asking, can you use curry powder instead of the leaves, or is it a different flavor?
So that's a good question. So curry powder is in fact a completely different product, an item. It's curry powder refers to the blend of different spices together. And so, yes, it would be very different. You could use it. It would still be good. It would add like a lot of sort of another flavor, but it would be different than the curry leaves.
Yeah, the smell in here when you added the curry leaves, it's very different. It's not like a curry, like a curry powder curry. It's like almost medicinal a little bit. It's definitely not like just curry powder in a leaf.
Yeah,
so You could, like you said, you could try it, but I'm sure it would be very different than what we're going to get.
It's a different plant, and I think I'd have to look this up. So yeah, I'll have to check on this, but I believe that curry sort of refers more to like something that imparts flavor, and that might be like an additional spice or blend.
Curry powder is usually what, like turmeric and cumin and chili.
3 or 4 or 5,
7 different things in it. So.
Lots of different spices, yeah. So I'm just cooking this frying it long enough for the curry leaves to kind of curl up a little bit and become crispy. That's what I'm aiming for here.
Did we answer the hing question? If there's anything you can substitute for, or is it better to just leave it out?
Yeah, so there's not much I can think of, honestly, to sub for hinge. It has such a unique flavor that I really can't think of a substitute. So you could just leave that out. And in fact, I've made this dish many times when I don't have hinge, and it's fine. It's still delicious.
Did you get that from downstairs? Did we have it?
So we do. We have it. Yeah, asafoetida. And then the Indian markets carry it.
Great.
Yeah. I should mention something with spices is that I was doing some research last year on kind of the value chain and just the trajectory that spices have experienced from the point of production to when we're actually purchasing them and then using them. And most spices from mainstream like mega markets are actually sitting in warehouses for a really long time, like months, if not years, before they even get to the shelf. So what we're generally experiencing is a spice that's maybe half its potency as it would be kind of fresh. So if it's not sort of too out of the way, it's often good to go to an Indian store where they'll have spices directly from India that maybe see a quick sort of a fast turnaround, and so they're always restocking with new things. If I'm in a bulk section, I'll always like open the jar and smell the spice first. You can kind of get a sense of its age and potency that way. But definitely don't trust the first spice you see, because there's a real difference and sort of spectrum of how strong they are.
Have you ever used burlap and barrel spice?
Yes,
yeah, they're
that's
really
a
good.
great company.
They work with single farm origin, and they get it over here very quickly rather than letting it sit.
And I think they send people to test the spice at the farm to make sure labor conditions are above board, and it's a very responsible, fair trade.
Ruby says, I put my fresh curry leaves in the sun and let them dry. They stay for a long time.
That's great. So to dry them yourself, that's a great idea.
Get a big bag and dry what you're not going to use.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Ruby. That's a great idea.
Just keeping an eye on time. We're at 6:30.
Yep, we're good. All right. So this is just getting to the point of the leaves kind of crisping up. So I'm going to take it off of the heat. And I'm now going to add, speaking of the asafoetida, the hinge. And I'm just going to grab a kind of a pinch. I think the recipe calls for about a 1/4 teaspoon. So just a little bit. I like things a little extra strong, but yeah.
And then you had to describe the smell of it. What's the closest you can get?
It's unlike anything else.
There's a little bit of onion in it to me, like allium.
Like in the allium family. Yeah, if you're someone that cooks with like garlic powder or onion powder, it has a little bit of that same aroma.
It's so unique.
Yeah, I wish I could send this to everyone to smell.
Next time you're at a co-op, just open the asafoetida jar and give a big whiff and you'll go, whoa, okay.
Ask your local co-op to carry it because it's really worth it. All right, so I'm gonna set that aside for a moment. And because this class didn't quite have enough time for me to fully cook the dal and the lentils, this wasn't quite the 20 to 25 minutes we would have needed. I actually prepped a sort of a TV batch this morning so that it would be ready to go. So I'm gonna show you what it would look like. So don't mind that the pot is different. It was the same method, same ingredients. So here we go. If I take off the lid, you can see it has gotten very fluffy and sort of absorbed all of that water and is actually completely like turned to sort of a mush almost. You don't have to take it this far, but it's sort of like a porridge. But you can see that the white to the yellow is about kind of a 50-50 ratio. It's interesting how the rice really swells up. We were using that very small grained Sona Masuri rice that really gets bigger. So, and oh, I should mention, if you are trying to cut down on your like gluten or on your sugars and starches, you could actually reduce the rice content even more and do like half a cup of rice to 1 cup of mung beans. So
I'm curious about the quinoa cup because that's more protein too.
That's true. If you're going for the maximum sort of health. Yeah. All right. So the final step is to add in the nuts and the cashews, and then our spices. So I always like to hold aside a couple of the cashews just to garnish at the end. So I'm going to choose some choice cashews here.
Some pretty ones.
Some good ones.
I have someone who says they think asafoetida smells quite musky.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I could see that.
Animal musk.
Musky, yep. And then we're going to pour in the spices. And you can see how just that little bit of turmeric has really turned all of the ghee yellow, which is just another nice touch.
We have someone asking a question about the consistency. You're getting a lot of questions. People are very involved. The mush of the finished one that you just held up looks more like the consistency of mashed potatoes rather than a runny oatmeal. Is it sort of like up to
it's kind of up to preference, like what amount of moisture or liquid you want in it. I did actually make another version this morning with using the dry roasting method. And let me show you that one. This one,
you could add a bunch more water.
You could add more water. Yeah. You absolutely could. If you want it more liquidy, sure, add some more water. You can see this one, it's sort of a little bit more toasted because you have the toasted gram there, dal. And
whether you like your oatmeal spoonable or slurpable, right?
And actually, when this came off the stove, it was a little bit more liquidy, and I might actually add a little more water. And when you're reheating it, because actually, this is a good thing to know, is it's always good to make a big batch because it gets better as it sits in the fridge. So you'll inevitably reheat it the next day. You'll probably want to add a little more water. Yeah. So we're just gonna mix this all together and then let it simmer for another 5 minutes or so. You can see we're getting all of that ghee mixed in. The whole batch is sort of turning bright yellow.
I'm so excited to eat this.
I'm so excited for you guys to try it. Yeah. Like I said, I've really acquired this taste where I crave it for breakfast. It's just so filling, and it's like it will keep you full for the whole day.
Anything you can make ahead and not have to think about it, 6:30 in the morning.
Make a big batch. Make a big batch, put it in the fridge and reheat it each morning for like a week. And I love it. All right, so we're gonna let that just kind of simmer with these spices for a bit. Yep, and feel free to add water as needed. I'm gonna put the lid on. And then I'm just going to talk you through how to do a chutney. So Pongal is a dish that is delicious on its own, but it also gets sort of dressed up with a couple of other sides that can be really tasty as well. If you're having it for breakfast, it might just be on its own or with a little chutney. If you're having it later in the day, you might eat it with sambar as well as chutney. Sambar is a kind of tomato and chili based sauce that's just really good with it as well. Also a South Indian specialty. We could do a whole class on sambar because there are all these different recipes that are all really good. But the recipe I wanted to show you is just very quick and easy. So I thought it would be kind of fun for you to do maybe as the dal is simmering, once you've tempered your spices, if you have a few extra minutes. So this is on the second page. It's the coconut chutney. And you could use either a dry desiccated coconut, which we actually have a lot of right here. This is also available in the bulk section. Or if you're near to an Indian market and can get fresh coconut, it's really, really nice to make this with a fresh coconut. So I was actually excited. I hadn't seen this at our local Indian market before, but we have this. If you're in Burlington, the Indian market in South Burlington has the sliced coconut. It's fresh, but it's been frozen. So it's in the freezer area and you just let it thaw in the fridge and you see there are these like beautiful, moist coconut pieces. It's like, for me, it's surreal to see this here in Vermont because it looks like so fresh, like it just came out of a tropical area. Yeah. So we're going to combine coconut with a couple of other spices, a couple of other ingredients in a blender. If you have a chutney jar at home, I'll often use just like a mason jar with a immersion blender in it, and then it's all ready to go and you can just put the top on and store it that way. If you like a more dry chutney, a food processor might be a little bit better. In order to blend everything in the blender, you're going to need at least kind of half to 1 cup of liquid, which will yield a more kind of liquidy chutney. I kind of like a liquidy chutney. I find it's nice to have that sort of texture difference with a dal like this. So
let me know when you're ready to switch out the blender.
Yeah, okay.
I'll help you unplug it.
Great. No, thank you. Yeah, so we've got the coconut. Then oftentimes South Indian chutneys use something called fried gram or chana dal or chana dalia. And this is actually a dal. This is like a chickpea. There are 2 types of chickpeas. This is the larger type that's been roasted. And I asked, I was chatting with the owner of the Indian market here, and I was asking, well, can I just toast or like roast my chana at home? Because I already had some. He was like, no, it's not going to turn out the right consistency. This is eaten as a snack. Like I could just be eating this. It's very kind of light and almost crumbly. So it's different than the raw chana that's been dried. So you want the chana dalia. Let me show you the packet. If you don't want to have just like another extra ingredient in the cupboard, feel free to use any nuts you might have on hand. Like you could use peanuts or walnuts or sunflower seeds, just something to give it some more like fatty proteinness to it. So I'm gonna, but the chana dalia does have a particular flavor that I sort of associate with the South Indian chutneys.
Quick question back to the porridge. Ruby's asking, can the rice be replaced with coarse semolina?
Oh, you could try that. Sure, you could try semolina. Yeah.
Try it and let us know how it comes out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. You could use cream of wheat. I mean, when I was making this, I was thinking this is kind of the consistency.
Same idea,
same idea as cream of wheat. That's a breakfast cereal. Then we're just gonna throw in some ginger root, more of those green chilies that we like. Feel free to leave these out if your household doesn't like the spicy.
Make sure you wash your hands before you touch your eyes.
Thank you.
Touch them.
Thank you, Carrie. Yeah. And then for this, I did toast some cumin because I'm not going to be tempering it. And this is about a teaspoon of toasted cumin seed. And then just a little bit of salt. If you'd like, you can add cilantro. I just wanted to show you quickly, I have a preferred method of storing spices. I love basically using or buying like a fresh herb and then like using it throughout the week. And I've noticed that just in a plastic bag in the fridge, they kind of like spoil really easily. They'll get soft and brown. And this is a really great way to create like a microclimate where I have a little bit of water and then it remains airtight, and you can keep cilantro or parsley for like almost 2 weeks like this. It's amazing. So I definitely recommend that if you're someone who uses a lot of fresh spices or fresh herbs. All right, so I'm just gonna add a little bit. The cilantro is certainly optional. Not everyone likes cilantro in their coconut chutney, but I like a little bit, especially in the winter when there aren't as many greens around. All right, so I think that this has simmered enough to basically let the sort of fragrance of those tempered spices permeate the dish. And we're just gonna let it sit now off of the heat for about 5 minutes. So thank you, Carrie.
Change for blender.
Change. We've just got one outlet. So now we need our sort of sour component to the chutney. So for this, you could either use lemon, just a squeeze of a whole lemon, or a lot of households will use tamarind. Tamarind is sold, we don't have it here, but you can also find that at the Indian store. It's at the Nadia or Nada Iraqi market has it in the cold case section. But you can basically just get sort of this chunk of puree, and it does have seeds in it, and add some hot water, boiling water, into a bowl and just let it sit for maybe like 20 minutes or so. And then at the end, when you're ready to use it, we're just going to pour it through a sieve and get all of that sort of sourness from it.
Ruby's asking if you could use chana flour instead of the whole
Oh, interesting.
beans, peas, whatever.
Yeah, so I wonder if chana flour has been baked or fried in the same way. I'm not sure if it would have exactly the same flavor, but you could certainly try it. Yeah, yeah. And I've even used just regular chana that I've like ground up in the Vitamix, so it turns into the flour. So yeah, I would absolutely say you could use that.
And then do you keep your cilantro in the fridge or on the counter?
So I keep it in the fridge in this sort of herb jar that I have, and it lasts a really long time that way.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna take this off the heat.
Do you want me to get the hot plate out of your way?
That would be great, actually. Yes, thank you.
So I lied. You will see me on camera one more time.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah.
So I'm then just gonna kind of press this tamarind through the sieve, and we're gonna get every last bit we can because it's got a really nice flavor. And then just to help us get as much in there as we can, I'm gonna get my water and pour my water over this, just to the amount that you'd want for your chutney. I'm not familiar with this blender. We'll see if it will blend with that amount of liquid. But between like half a cup to a cup should do it.
The lid.
And let's see, here's our lid. Great.
And just really push any of the buttons.
Okay.
Like they all sort of will do
All
the
right,
same
so
thing.
sorry if this is gonna be a little loud. Okay, I think we need a little bit more liquid. If you've got a Vitamix at home, that will usually grind the chana very quickly. Whew, the peppers are pretty strong.
Strong.
Yeah, all right. All right, this is looking good. Yeah, I think I'm gonna want it a little bit more liquidy.
Are you looking for a totally smooth texture? Are you looking for chunks?
So it's really personal what you like. I like seeing a little bit what's in my chutney. So I kind of don't like it completely pureed.
Well, I just got a whiff of it
Did
all
you?
of a
Yeah.
sudden. Yeah.
It's I mean when those green peppers are raw and then pureed, it's like their essential oils go into the air
Yeah.
and yeah.
Pepper sprayed
You have to
yourself.
be, yeah, exactly. To be careful. All right, so I think this will do it. And then I'm just going to kind of decant it into a little bowl here.
Could you use yogurt instead of water, or is this specifically a water-based
Oh,
recipe?
you could, sure. You could use yogurt. Yeah. I might take it a little bit farther if I were serving this, but it's kind of nice I like to sort of see what's
Yeah, you
in
can
it.
kind of see like coconut and
Yeah, I recognize the ingredients. And then the final step, if you wanted to, is it's perfectly fine as it is if you're just doing like a quick weeknight chutney. And then this can go right onto the pongal. Or if you are, excited about the tempering technique, the final step could be to temper a few additional spices. And I'll often just use ghee with some mustard seeds, maybe some red pepper to give it like a contrast in color, and then maybe some more cumin or really anything else that you might be excited to add. Some turmeric, put that all together and cook that in the ghee for a couple minutes, and then just pour it on top. Maybe some curry leaves would be nice with it, and that sort of gives it that finishing touch that it's sort of a South Indian tempered chutney, coconut chutney. So our final step, I'm gonna bring over our pongal and just show you how I like to plate it.
Someone asking, I didn't see anything sweet go into that chutney. Would you add sweetness to this one? Or is it specifically a not really sweet one?
So if I'm using it with this ven pongal, I actually don't like a too sweet flavor. I think the coconut has a little bit of sweetness, but you certainly could use like mango or really any fruits or add a little jaggery or anything if you wanted to have, a little bit more sweetness.
The tamarind a little bit, right? It's like
the tamarind is a little bit, that sweet sour combo. But certainly feel free to just play around with the recipes and add whatever is most to your liking. So if I'm just having this as a breakfast kind of myself, I will just put it into a bowl and kind of eat it quickly on the go. But say I have a plate. If I'm serving it, like if I'm making maybe like a South Indian dinner menu for guests and I'm serving it, I would actually try to plate it a little nicer. So if you look at this, it's delicious, but it may not be as aesthetically pleasing as your guests are used to for a dinner party. So what I'm gonna do is just kind of fancy it up a little bit. I'm gonna coat a bowl with oil. This is my favorite sort of rice plating bowl. It's got this nice lip at the bottom that I can then like pull it off with. And we'll see if this is gonna work.
Is this pretty much always hot, or could you ever eat it?
Yeah, I'd say it's better hot. Okay. It's but yeah, in a rush, you could definitely get it out of the fridge and just eat it. But I think that the flavors of the spices sort of wake up with the heat. So it's a little more flavorful. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of make sure this is pressed into the bowl. I don't want to let it sit too long or it might get sticky. Wait for it to fall down, maybe.
There you go.
Kind of rushing it a bit, but and then remember we held back some of our toasted cashews and some of our, I didn't remember to hold back the curry leaves. So you'll remember that. Don't make the same mistake as I did. And then you can just kind of lay those on the top in a artistic fashion. If you've got someone in your household who likes to garnish things, that's a great job for them. And then it's ready to go. And then it's sort of lovely on its own on a plate. Or if you have, if you've made the sambar, that has a nice like red orange richness. You could like put some on a, maybe on a little bowl, like right next to it on the plate. Same with the chutney. I would probably serve this maybe with like individual bowls of chutney right next to it. Chutney and sambar is probably how I would serve it. So
gorgeous.
So there you go. Yeah. So thank you all for coming tonight. I hope that you've been able to pick up some tips and tricks here. I would definitely encourage you to try this. It's just a really fun recipe. Don't let the fact that there are these sort of less common ingredients in the recipe, because if you can't find something like the hinge or the chana, just leave it out. It will still be delicious. You could increase the cumin or increase other things, but definitely give it a try. I think you'll find it's a really nice kind of hearty breakfast dish for the Northeast for the winter here. So great. Thank you very much, and best wishes for your cooking.
Yeah, big thanks to Anna for teaching. That was lovely. I'm so excited to dig into that plate. I'll send a survey link out tomorrow. Would love to know your thoughts on the class and further ideas that you'd like to see from Anna or other live stream instructors. And if you make this dish, send me photos. I can pass them along to Anna. Anna also has her email at the bottom of the handout if you're curious and want to get on her mailing list. But we love to see it when people make the foods. Yeah. When they are all cooking together. It's really a lot of fun to be like, I made this in my own kitchen. Yeah. But yes, thank you all so much. Anna, do you have
Absolutely. You know, and that reminds me, if you do have questions as you're making it, feel free to shoot me an email. I like to remain available for folks if you have any questions. And also, I will send Carrie just a couple links to information about the Pongal festival so that you can kind of be aware what's happening. It will be starting on January 14th this year. So feel free to make this for Pongal next week if you'd like to. So
thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and end the live stream and hope to